Whenever I'm not looking at my favorite characters in games being stylistically violated to cater to the thirst of the masses, I like to take my time and think about my favorite series. What up, degenerates? Final Fantasy XVI may be coming out this year, but if you ask me, I think it'll be delayed again, even if Square says it won't. It's kind of tradition at this point. Regardless of whether it comes out in 2022 or not, I want to talk about what fans really want from Final Fantasy XVI. Now, the reason I put those four things on the thumbnail is that those are the aspects of the game we as fans actually want to see, but don't exactly expect. I'll explain. We already know FF16 will look good, we already know it's going to have amazing music, and we already know that we're going to go back to a more fantasy or medieval setting. Except for that last one about the setting, all of these points I just mentioned are expectations fans always have for mainline titles. That's just where the bar is for the series. Setting's really more like cool, back to fantasy stuff, which we haven't seen in a single player mainline Final Fantasy since probably 9, so it's definitely refreshing. Anyways, let's get down to the first thing on the list, action combat, with an asterisk. I only think that's important to note because I don't know if Clive is the only character we get to control, and can only be controlled like a Devil May Cry 5 character. I'll actually link this video from someone who actually captured the comparison with DMC5 pretty well. I also suggest checking out Final Fantasy Union's video on all up-to-date info on FF16's development and also of some key developers. But the key takeaway here is that there are two guys from Capcom who've worked on Devil May Cry 5 and Monster Hunter World. So yeah, probably shouldn't expect any turn-based combat. And in my opinion, that's okay. When was the last time Final Fantasy has really done turn-based combat? And I'm not accounting Active Time Battle or ATB for short, either, because it's not like a turn-by-turn thing where enemies had to wait for you to make a move. The reason I think fans should give up on the turn-based combat thing is that it's pretty clear at this point that Final Fantasy is trying to move past it and utilize a system that demands more of your attention. And I'm not knocking turn-based games either. Persona games are absolutely a joy to play, but it's clear that the devs who work on the Final Fantasy games are tired of or just uninterested in making a turn-based Final Fantasy. It kinda explains why Square still makes games like Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler. And to show how far they've come in getting action-based combat right, just look at the difference between Final Fantasy XV and Final Fantasy VII Remake. From the time between those two games, Square Enix clearly figured out how to nail down fast-paced action mechanics, while also melding in the ATB and materia systems from the original FF7, like as an added bonus, but technically not because that's what they were supposed to do, in order to make it feel like a remake. I mean, it's like they took the soul of the materia system and shaped it into something more malleable, something that feels better than 13's combat system, like with the staggering, but also feels as smooth as Kingdom Hearts is. It's truly impressive, and it's something I know we'll see in an even better, more polished version of in Final Fantasy XVI. Alright, now what fans really want to experience. A fresh new story. No kind of remakes that are more like redos. No Fabula Nova Crystallis nonsense. Just a new fantasy story. A more grown-up one too, apparently. Which is a good thing. Finally, the franchise is 35 years old for fuck's sake. It's older than at least half of its fan base, which is mainly composed of weebs, general RPG enthusiasts, and most recently, WoW refugees. And I really don't think Final Fantasy has any casual fans, maybe just people who play 7 and 2 others, maybe? But I wrote engrossing story for a specific reason. Let me ask you something. When was the last time, aside from 14, you felt truly satisfied or fulfilled or just had your mind blown by the story you just experienced in a Final Fantasy game? 15?
Hell no.
13?
No.
12?
You need to shut the up.
Yeah, it's 10 for me. Maybe for y'all too, actually. Maybe Crisis Core, actually. But I imagine it's the same for most of the hardcore fans. See, I think we want a story that starts and ends preferably in the same game, and one that completes you, metaphorically. Or maybe literally, considering the wonderful degeneracy that's running rampant in this series. We want a story that does something to us in a way that makes us feel like something we didn't know, deep down, was missing, and have Final Fantasy XVI story fill that void. Yes, I realize that's asking for a lot, but this is a mainline Final Fantasy title. Bar is always going to be high, remember? As it should be. That's where they left it. Or maybe Katsura Hashino and the rest of the Persona team did. Maybe they did. Maybe that's where they left it. There are a lot of games whose stories just leave you feeling all kinds of ways. Persona 5, Call of Duty World at War, Sleeping Dogs, Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag, so many others. But as an FF fan who still hasn't even played or gotten into Heavensward yet, look, I'm trying, y'all, but the beginning's just really grindy. I feel like I have this Final Fantasy shaped hole where my heart used to be. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels like this. And I'm not saying this in a way to throw shade on FF7 Remake, because that's definitely not the case. I love that game. Well, kinda. That ending just felt, I don't know, unnecessary. But overall, what I really want, what I think longtime FF fans and even casual fans want, I guess if there are any, is a Final Fantasy that'll stand taller than 6 or 7 or 9 or hell even 14. And considering the team that's making this game, I'm confident that 16 will be added to the Final Fantasy GOAT debates. Alright, now we've reached party members. Alright, this one might be kinda short because I don't know how a party system could work in a character action game, but I do know that fans, myself included, want more playable characters. And maybe I'm overthinking it because FF7 Remake kinda solved this problem, so maybe it'll be more like that, but that also makes me wonder if the character switching thing is as simple as it is in the remake for FF7, then why didn't the DMC5 team, the same team that was led by Ryota Suzuki, combat side of the team, who now leads FF16's combat design team, didn't implement it themselves in their game? I'm guessing it's because the RE engine couldn't do that specific thing between switching characters seamlessly, but that RE engine does do a whole lot. Nonetheless, if we're going old school in aesthetics, then hopefully we'll go old school with classes. From what we already know, Clive Rosefield, who I imagine is the protagonist for FF16, gotta be, will be our Cloud, or Cecil, or Titus, basically our main guy, the all-rounder. But who's gonna be our mage, or healer, or will the combat system be like the materia system and allow for customization? Personally, I'd like to see a job system similar to FF12, the Zodiac Age, where roles are carefully selected and committed to, but maybe without the possibility of changing it. The whole party member situation's kind of difficult for me to gauge what fans really want, because I know for sure fans want more than one playable character, but I don't know how many, and I don't know how those other characters should operate. My guess is, based on what we can infer from what Yoshi P has said about the story of this game, and kind of the themes that the story is going for, I think we're going to see something like the job system, but I don't think we as the players can decide the job for these characters. And it's this specific part he said about what kind of experience he wants to share in 16. It's where he says, "I want to create a world of Final Fantasy that those who know the good and bad of reality can also be passionate about. I believe that there are certain hardships that are experienced when becoming an adult. So I want to make the main theme of this game something that those who grew up playing Final Fantasy and understand reality can still enjoy, get something out of, and think about." First of all, that sounds perplexing, but awesome. Secondly, and actually that was all. So what I can infer from that quote is that in real life, in adult life, it's really, really hard to change career paths. So I'm guessing it's either going to be impossible or really fucking hard to change your job in the game. Kind of like altering your paths in your party in 10 in the sphere grid. Like if you wanted to take Waka and turn him into a black mage, pretty hard to do early in the game. You'd have to do it a lot later in the end, closer to the end game. I'm guessing something like that. As I said, I'm not sure how the party would work, but I know I'd like to have one regardless, and I think that's speaking for most fans. Getting more playable characters. Final Fantasy fans, I mean, we like big casts. That's because most characters are just well developed. The Square really takes their time developing each character. Usually. Anyway, that's all I have to say in that matter. And finally, what fans want from Valisthea, that's what the world is going to be called in FF16, is for it to be dense. It looks big, but as we learned from 15, just because it's a big world doesn't mean it'll be a fun world. Creative Business Unit 3, they seriously need to call themselves Team A or something. They need to ensure that various parts of Valisthea, its levels, feel intuitive to explore, but difficult to access. Elden Ring, the game everyone's been talking about this year, does a great job of accomplishing this. Everywhere you go feels somewhat inviting, but also menacing, or mysterious, or both. Basically, it does a great job of guiding its players indirectly to whatever that seems interesting. But since it'll have been over 20 years since we got a medieval or old-fashioned fantasy, Final Fantasy, and graphics are almost photorealistic nowadays, maybe we'll see territorial monsters, like Flans and Marlboros, only being in swamps, or flying monsters only on top of mountains, or something like that. I think 15 kind of placed monsters like this, but I don't remember it that well. I don't know how they'll do it, but I trust them to make it interesting nonetheless. And those are all the things I figured fans would want to see from Final Fantasy XVI. If I left anything out that you thought was important, then leave a comment down below and let's have a discussion. Anyways, take care guys.